All right, I did it. I finally finished it after 73 hours of playing this game. I can finally form a solid opinion regarding the so-called woke dragon age, the Veilguard. I'm going to break down this review into key points, and I'm going to start with story and narrative. The overall plot structure, to be honest, is, to me, it's kind of lame. All that really happens is that Solus, a character that's from the previous Dragon Age game, Dragon Age Inquisition, is trying to do something to tear open the veil, and what happens is you release two other elven gods, and they just become the big bad. It just replaces the whole point of the Dreadwolf being the main enemy, and I think that's kind of like a cop out, because I actually think that if we actually had to fight Solus, which a character that is, you know, our friend, or was our friend when we played the previous game, becoming the enemy and trying to, you know, reason with him, I think would have been a better plot than to just replace him with two generic bad guys. The dialogue for this game is pretty simplistic, and I think I mentioned it on my previous post. Most of the times, they're just meh and they're basic, and sometimes the game treats me like I'm a child, both in conversation and in puzzle mechanics. Although player's choice still impacts the story, so things like making decisions on what to do. In previous Dragon Age games and in like previous Mass Effect games, there's always a part where you would split up your teams, and your teams would be delegated to certain tasks, and depending on how their loyalty level are, they could either die or live, still is present in this game, which I think it's still pretty good. Handling the controversial topics like being trans and non-binary, you know, those kinds of representation, I think it's all right. I think the main issue that I have with Dragon Age the Veilguard is, for the lack of a better term, modern speak. Characters can sometimes talk like they're not from this universe. You know, Morgan, Solus, and some characters don't do this, and they actually deliver a really good performance. So I don't get why some of the characters do. Like, the main character Rook has a decent performance as well, but sometimes he can get a little bit too preachy regarding, you know, some themes. But really, it's that modern speak. Imagine if you were like in a medieval setting and you have a character talk to their mother, you would prefer if they said mother than say mommy. You know, it's those little things that kind of catch me off guard and kind of takes me away from the immersion. Like, if you would do a greeting, you would go and say like, greetings adventurer, or something like that, right? And then instead of saying hey, like, it's that kind of modern speak that takes me away from my immersion, and I think is generally what I think is the issue with Dragon Age the Veilguard, because they're using words and they're focusing on things that are not actually in universe, in my opinion. Like, it's weird trying to talk, I'm talking about Tosh here, oh, I'm a non-binary person, but I mean, is non-binary like a term in a place where magic exists, and in a place where you can have someone like Tash who's like half Kunari, half Rivani, and also part dragon? Is this really a topic that we're going to talk about in this kind of medieval setting? I think a good example on putting LGBTQ themes in a game would be Ghost of Tsushima. There is a mission there on one of your companions, Lady Masako. She's actually a lesbian, but they do that so well, and they do it in a way where it doesn't feel like it's tacked on, and it's kind of part of the story and part of the world. And I think that's what's missing in Dragon Age. LGBTQ topics should not make a bad game. We already know this because there are games that have these and they're considered masterpieces. You have Baldur's Gate 3. You also have The Last of Us, and you even have shows like Arcane, right? So having LGBTQ storylines doesn't mean that it's going to be bad. And if the writing is terrible and the way they're introduced into the story is a little bit too preachy, that becomes an issue. And I think that's where most of the people kind of dislike the game. But we got to move on to what this actually is, and this is a video game, so we got to talk about other things. We'll talk about gameplay and mechanics. The combat system, I think, in my opinion, is not Dragon Age. The combat system is more similar to Mass Effect games, wherein it's just you, Rook, the main character. You act like a shepherd type character, and obviously you have teammates, but they're not really characters you can use. They just follow you around, you cast your spells, and when you cast their abilities, they sort of count as your abilities as well, similar to how it works in Mass Effect, where you have teammates that can just throw their skills. Your teammates are essentially immortal, and you don't even really need to level them up or anything. They do have stats so you can build up their skills and abilities, but you don't really need to focus on them. Like, I finished the game with my characters having shit gear. Nothing matters, because all you really want is the buffs on all their abilities to like help you become strong. Like, sometimes I would use them to trigger a reaction, but most of the times I would use them to like give me buffs and give me invulnerability, like Tasha's ability or Davrin's ability. I'm just always picking the mages because they have the ability to slow time, and that's where I kind of like abuse the game, because in the later stages, when you get characters that can slow time, you also get like a free cast on your ability, and I think that made my character a little bit too OP. The character creation and customization options are, I think they're pretty good. Characters can look beautiful, although the defaults are kind of lame in my opinion, but you can, if you give it time and you work for it, you can actually make pretty good looking characters. I think my character is pretty good looking. Yeah, it's pretty, there's enough sliders that you can play around with. Skill trees and ability progression, I would also give them a plus for this. There's a lot of things you can do. I made a mage that uses an orb and a blade, so it's more of like a battle mage. It's like a close quarters mage. But yeah, I focused on the lightning element as well as the fireball element, and that's where I kind of focused my abilities, alternating between them. But yeah, there are a lot of builds that you can actually make for this, and it doesn't lock you into a particular playstyle, because you can go anywhere you want, and the ability to actually reset your skills anytime you want is also it's something that's really, really good as well. You can do specializations for your character up to like 3 different specializations. So each character has 3 different specializations. So the mage, warrior, and rogue have 3 branching specializations that you can choose. No blood magic though. I kind of wish there was blood magic, but there isn't. For visuals and audio, I think this is where the game really kind of stand out. The character designs are actually pretty good. In my opinion, they are kind of good. Sometimes the Kunari faces can look a little bit weird, and I don't know, maybe I just like the good old Dragon Age 2 look. But yeah, they just look like humans with horns, and I don't quite like that. But in terms of just the design element of the armors and the environments and the locations, it is actually pretty good. This game has a lot of really nice vistas, and if we're talking just vistas, it's very good. Soundtrack and sound design is very serviceable, and the voice acting, despite the writing being kind of poor, is really well done. Now, in terms of technical aspects, the performance on this game on my machine, I really did not have issue. I'm running an RTX 4070 with a Ryzen 5 7600, and I did not encounter any issues at all. No bugs, no game-breaking glitches, no extremely long load times. Everything is good. Apart from there's a few hitches that I encounter here and there, wherein when you would load into an area that's like it's trying to load new content, it would hitch a little bit. But other than that, I think this game is polish-wise is very polished. Now let's talk about comparing this to previous Dragon Age games. If you want the good old Dragon Age formula, this is not the game you're looking for. This is more Mass Effect than Dragon Age. They changed the whole formula. You can't even use the other characters anymore. You're just really limited to using Rook. So if you're the type of player that's looking for an old Dragon Age experience, then this is not the Dragon Age for you. If you're a new player that's never touched Dragon Age before, I don't think this is an issue for you. So yeah. So again, saying that I've played this game for 73 hours means like, what's the overall experience? What's the fun factor? What's the engagement level? I think it was just okay. There were times where the game actually did feel like Dragon Age to me. There were multiple moments. The one where you would fight Gillanane with her twin dragons. There's like 2 dragons, one blue ice one and then one fire one. That one was really, really good. The final fight, actually, where the talking is just minimized and everything is just straight up balls to the wall action, I think was very, very good as well. And I actually started feeling the stakes of my characters, if their loyalty missions were complete or not, if they would survive on where I would send them. So I actually really liked the final mission because the final mission still felt like Dragon Age to me. Replayability for this game is also very, very high, considering you can play this game with, you know, multiple romance options, character builds. You can also play the game differently. You can be a nice guy, you can be like a sort of stern guy. You can't really be an asshole in this game, which I think is a detriment, because you can't just be mean to people. You can be nice, sort of nice, and stern, and that's pretty much it. But considering that kind of replayability, I think it does have good value for money if you want to play this game for a long time. So who's this game really for? The question I really need to ask you is if you've ever played Dragon Age before. If you're a person that's never played Dragon Age before, I think this is going to be an okay experience for you. Maybe even an above average experience for you if you don't really care about all the things that I just mentioned earlier. But if you're a Dragon Age fan, this is definitely a step down. For all the veterans of this series, this is not what you're looking for. And this is, I would go as to say that if you were a Dragon Age fan, you can just skip this. It doesn't have the RPG elements that you want. It doesn't have the nuance in the writing and the storylines, and it's a little bit more modernized for, you know, for my liking. Because obviously, if you're someone who's played the old Dragon Age, you're probably a little bit older, and yeah, this is not for you. Ultimately, I do think that the game got more hate than it deserved. It's not a bad game, and I wouldn't call it a masterpiece too. But if you're interested in playing, I suggest you get this on sale. It's not a must-buy, but I think you still get your money's worth and enjoy it for what it is if you got it cheap. So, for the rating, I will be rating this game an underwhelming but decent.